Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today, I am joined by Casey Bull, founder of CascadEffects. Casey has worked with orthodontic practices, helping teams get clear on their goals, stay aligned, and actually make progress without burnout. In this episode, we're diving into OKRs, objectives, and key results, and how practices can use them to create structure, build momentum, and stay strategic even in the busiest seasons. If you've ever felt like your team meetings are a waste of time or your goals keep getting lost in the shuffle, this episode's for you. So let's dive in. This episode was brought to you by ADEC. Hey docs, on this podcast, I talk about a lot of different ways you can set your practice apart. But here's one that might surprise you. Maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the equipment you use can make a big difference, not just for the patient experience, but for you and your team too. That's why I want to let you know about a new line of orthodontic equipment from ADEC. I visited their headquarters in Oregon earlier this year to take a sneak peek for myself, and I have to say, I was impressed. ADEC has manufactured award-winning dental equipment for 60 plus years, and they're bringing that same level of excellence to ortho. From comfortable compact patient chairs to a versatile workstation and delivery to ergonomic dental stools, ADEC orthodontic equipment is designed for a smooth and easy workflow. Day after day, patient after patient, see the difference it can make for your practice. Click the link in our show notes to learn more about ADEC Orthodontic Solutions. All right, Casey, I am so excited to have you back on Hey Docs. Thanks for being here today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure, always.
Yes, for maybe some of our guests who did not have an opportunity to listen to you before or have had a chance to meet you, I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background, what has inspired you to create your own new business, CascadEffects, and what gap you were hoping to fill in the way orthodontic practices run their teams and set their goals.
Yeah, my name is Casey, and I worked in an orthodontic office, transitioned into being a practice consultant, and found that incredibly fulfilling. I did that for a long time, became the global director of content and community for the Invisible Orthodontist, and then launched my Ortho VA. So for the last couple of years, did that, and that has been incredible. So that was why we talked last time.
Yeah.
And most recently, I have been inspired, to really work with practices at a granular level again. Working with my VA was super fulfilling, and all the practices who need help with staffing, it's great. But oftentimes, getting a person on the team doesn't necessarily solve all your problems. It solves some of the problems. It doesn't solve all of them. So I've been really inspired on how can I make a bigger impact. And so that's what CascadEffects is here to do. I was inspired to work back with very deeply with practices. So it's essentially fractional COO services, become part of the team, help launch. I'm like the training wheels, if you will, to get the team to a level where they can perform at a high level independently.
I love that. I love that. And I'm really excited about today's topic because when we talk about, as I like to say in my consulting business with my clients, the unsexy side of doing business, that part where we're talking about the back end component of it, a lot of times the management, the leadership component, especially for a lot of doctors, they got into this because they want to be really great clinicians and want to just be able to deliver these amazing results out there to patients. But when it comes to actually running the business and setting goals and holding your team to different standards and holding yourself to standards. That's not always the fun part of doing business, but yet it's something that we all need to do in our businesses. And so having you on today and the topic that we're going to dive into, I'm super excited to be talking about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I can't tell you how many people are like, I'm exhausted with the staffing challenge or with training and everything goes to me. And all of a sudden, I'm essentially the office manager, right?
Yeah.
And it's just too much on one person's plate. And it's not what they envision for themselves.
Right. So we're going to talk today about OKRs. And I think there's so many acronyms out there, right, for different things. And we've got SOPs and we got OKRs and we got this and we got that. But OKRs, in case anybody who's listening maybe isn't familiar with that term, are objectives and key results. And I know that can sound very corporate-ish. Again, as business owners, we have to think of ourselves as a business. And there are just some terms that are out there in other industries that I think really do relate well into our industry. So what I would love is if you can just dive into what an OKR is and how they can actually help our orthodontic practices, just from the practical side of it to the team side of it, and really helping us as business owners keep a vision or keep something in front of us as far as what really matters when we're looking at our key objectives and what and how we're going to get to the results that we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I'm very passionate about. OKRs do come from the corporate world, but I think adapting them can be really practical for orthodontic offices. At the core, OKRs are just a way of answering two questions. What are we trying to achieve? And how will we know we're making progress? So when we think about KPIs, the other acronym, it's typically a lagging metric, meaning that's the result of said performance, right? What was the conversion? What were our starts? What was our production?
Yes.
By the time you look at those numbers, it's too late to fix those numbers. It's the lagging metric. So we need to look at leading KPIs, but there's a formal structure that you can have that really makes it make sense, especially for the team, in the form of OKRs, objectives and key results. So the objective is like the big goal. It's more qualitative in nature, but we create a formula, so it's quantitative, but it's meaningful, it's motivating. My objective is maybe one of my objectives as an administrative coordinator is to increase dental referrals.
Yep.
That's the objective. Or maybe it starts from dental referrals, right? So what is the actual objective? And then you create key results that feed into that, 2 or 3 measurable outcomes that show whether we're on track or not. And the way that we do it at CascadEffects is we do it as a percentage toward our target based off of the percentage toward the time period. So if we're doing it monthly or quarterly, so are you on track? Are you falling behind? Are you ahead? All of those things. And it gives you that meaningful information, the actionable insight, not just insight. But really what supercharges OKRs is the way that it lights the fire on the team. So instead of delegating tasks to the team I did the follow-up. I did the 6 touch points on my long-term pending, right? I did that.
Yes.
They now bring the focus to the outcomes and they have to own the outcomes. Look, the doctor can say, look, I don't need to know how you get there. I want to know that you got there. And that's what the OKRs get, that focus on the outcome and hopefully build momentum toward it, even if we're falling behind.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you can give us, because again, I think this is a very new concept in our industry. And unless somebody has come from outside of our industry, this just feels foreign, right? And very different than the way we're used to setting goals in an orthodontic office. So I'm wondering if you can maybe just give us some tips, kind of building on that, just a little bit on like, how do you even baby step into that? And is this something where, we're setting like for a year at a time, 3 years at a time, 5 years, 1 quarter? Can you just walk that back for us just a little bit and help us there?
Yeah. I like to do quarterly. I think monthly, it's so fast. And then there's innate seasonality. But if you look at as a quarter, it should overall be pretty stable and you can set targets that are reasonable. So I like quarterly, and depending on the tenure of the team and tenure of the systems and practices, look at the last year or the last quarter even. I'm working with a startup practice right now. We just looked at the first quarter for data and we use that as the target for Q2. We didn't look at full, obviously we didn't have it, but ultimately you want to look at what was the point of hiring this particular person. So I have a patient care coordinator who's a virtual assistant, and their goal is patient communication and patient reports, right? They need to keep up with said patient reports. So those are the reasons why I hired them. And obviously for a treatment coordinator, you would look at why do you have a treatment coordinator? What objectives as a whole are there? And look, you're not going to get it perfect the first round. So just start with something, even if it's one or two objectives. Then you say, how can I measure that? How can I measure that my patient care coordinator is handling patient communication? Then you have to look at what data do you have access to. So there might be a limitation depending on the VoIP provider you have, but dive into what data can I have access to. So it doesn't have to be a cookie cutter thing that you have to measure this particular metric, but I'm looking at call answer rate, right? Calls aren't going to voicemail. We need to make sure that calls aren't going to voicemail. One of the things that we found when implementing OKRs is while we felt like no calls were going to voicemail because during work hours, calls weren't going to voicemail. But guess what? The call answer rate actually didn't improve that much because we found that most of the missed calls from before bring on a VA were after hours or before hours. But then when we saw that, we're like, let's look at it deeper. When are those calls being missed? Now let's have the VA start an hour earlier. And now we actually see in the improvement on calls not going to voicemail. This is like the tactical power of looking at them in this way. So setting those KPIs like text response rate, how on average, how fast are we responding to texts, missed calls, how many voicemails, how fast does it take us to respond to voicemails, those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I love that you're even just talking about that last little segment that you even just said there. It's been something for me as a consultant that is really on my mind a lot, and just how much change we've had in our industry. And 10 years ago, we wouldn't even have thought about really measuring how quickly does one of my front office team respond to a text message, or how long do those emails sit in the inbox, because that was not a major way of communication. But now when we think about it, even just that one little piece, if we aren't paying attention to that objective and don't have a system in place for it that then we can track the results for, I feel like just in general, as orthodontic practices, we're leaving a lot on the table there, and really maybe even letting our patients down when and I'm going to use this as a personal example. I wanted to schedule an appointment with the doctor. They had a widget on their website that said, schedule an appointment with us. I put in my information, and then I got an email back from them 24 hours later that said, call our office to schedule an appointment. I'm like, hell, if I wanted to call your office, I would have called in the first place.
Wow. You had to go through a widget to an email to a phone.
And I guess my point on that is all the way back to your points. If, these are like that higher level things, right? That if we are not paying attention to it and then putting those objectives in place with our team members, it's one thing to say, here's your job description. We want you to answer the phones and respond to texts and do this and that. But if we don't have a way to truly measure what they're doing, it is very hard to then go, are they good for my team or not good for my team? They show up every day, they do their job, but are they actually helping my business or just existing within my business?
Absolutely. There's two things that come to mind as you explain those things. And one of them is, I want my marketing coordinator, who's also has multiple hats, but let's just say the marketing coordinator person on the team. I want you to schedule X amount of lunch and learns per time period with dentists, right? Why?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
the objective is I want starts from dental referrals.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at what are some of those key results. So some of those key results are how many consults are being scheduled from doctor referrals?
Yeah.
How many starts are happening from doctor referrals? And then guess what? If she doesn't complete all the lunch and learns, but she has the ultimate result that you're looking for, then that's fantastic. I'm not looking for busy work for the sake of busy work. I don't have to, I'm sure you're with this too. Practices want all the playbooks and they're like, oh, what are the things that we should be doing? And I'm a big believer on not doing something that doesn't add value. It might be best practice, but if it doesn't add return on effort or return on investment, don't do it.
Yes, absolutely. It's just we just have to think about our businesses differently.
Yeah.
And I think so many times what has worked in the past and worked for previous generations of orthodontic practices is not where we should be now. And we just have to think differently, and we have to be okay with embracing some of the out of our industry concepts within our industry, because we are not just these little, I don't know, we are a business, but just we're cut off from everything else. We are really, truly running business, especially when we get up there and we're 2 million, 3 million, 4 million plus practices. We've got to have a bigger look at this. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit. And one of the things that I know you talk a lot about is defining 10 state as part of goal setting. And I'm wondering if you can, again, new verbiage, let's talk about what that means, how doctors can use this concept to really clarify and align their team vision.
Yeah. So 10 state is just 10 out of 10, right? What would my practice look like if it was a 10 out of 10? What would my new patient process look like if it was a 10 out of 10? And yes, we set our targets. I want to hit this much production per year. I want to see this many starts, or I want this much net profit, or whatever your goal is. Let's set that. But let's also especially work with the team members to help define, so they have some ownership and feel like they can be creative. Yeah. If I was a 10 out of 10 in my role, how would I be contributing to the team? What would that look like? What systems might I need? What tools might I have access to? What tools might I want to get rid of? What would that 10 out of 10 be? And I think that keeps our eye on the big, hairy goal not being a fiscal goal. Yeah. We have that, but it can't be the only thing. We have to feel pride in, oh my gosh, I have achieved excellence for the sake of excellence. Yes. And what I find is that is what really motivates or taps into some people, not, I can't say all, but some people's innate motivation more than we hit 50 starts. It's okay. But that was a struggle and I was stressed out. So I didn't get a whole lot of job satisfaction, but congratulations, team. Yeah. So having that 10 out of 10, and when we have reviews of OKRs, we're also anchoring that to, and where is this? I like to say department. You are the owner of your own department. You are the treatment coordinator. That's the sales department, okay? In your department, because it also disassociates, it's not me, I'm not a 6 out of 10, it's the department. Or my role is a 6 out of 10. And that way, I hit my performance, but to be honest, it was rocky and I messed up on sending that claim, or I didn't put in the contract the same day, so we ran on a day and I had to do it tomorrow, and it wasn't a 10 out of 10. So having them be honest with themselves also helps with accountability. Yeah. Yes. Because they are reporting themselves on where they are at in comparison to the 10 state. But you also have to define the 10 state, which is typically a lot more fun in a creative session where we're designing what the 10 state looks like or dreaming it up, versus what's our production target this year. Sure. Yeah, and I can definitely see the value in this. Not that it doesn't work in a startup state, but I can really see the value in this when, you're a little bit more of an established practice. Maybe you're 3, 4, 5 years in, and you've got all of your core team members, you've got those core positions covered in the practice. And now
I just feel in working with doctors in those first 3 to 5 years, we're still just working on figuring out how to do business and what
Yeah.
it's going to look like. And I really feel like you kind of settle in and hit your stride probably about year 4 and 5 and on. And I can really see the benefit of something like this. Again, not to say it can't be done with a startup, but gosh, when you've got those key team members and they are through training and can actually understand like the big picture, because part of a new practice is as a doctor and a lot of times team members, they're just trying to understand the big picture of what's going on. I talk to my docs a lot about in the beginning, we're just working on that one foot in front of the other. We're just trying to make sure we check all the boxes of all the things we have to get done. And there becomes this aha moment when you've been doing something for a while where it's like the clouds roll away and you're like, oh, I get the big picture. I get this. And I think for the 10 state, that makes so much sense when we've got team members that are at that place to then really have them buy in. I love the buy in component, but also give you feedback on, as a doctor, this is what's going to help me achieve. Because you may have thought, oh, I put this system in place and it works great. And they're like, honestly, maybe that's a roadblock to me achieving what I need to achieve. So having that kind of give and take back and forth, I love that. I think that makes so much sense.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. And I think it also helps like with the focus. And again, it ties back to those objectives. So if I hired this person to own patient communication, but I start delegating all these other things, then the 10 state of the patient of their role starts to diminish because you have them cropping photos and you have them do all this other administrative tasks so that don't answer the phone. So I need those photos cropped, and you lose sight of what their purpose is. And then you wonder, why did hiring a VA not actually make the impact? We didn't have the discipline or the focus to keep them in that area that we wanted them.
And now a word from the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Hey docs, if you want to have a great business, the right practice management software is essential. But some can be slow, outdated, and lacking good support. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to all orthodontists. It's the fastest, most reliable, and most secure platform to grow your business and improve your efficiency. It's completely web-based, so you can run your entire practice anywhere and from any device with no servers, no downloads, or hidden fees. They even have the most helpful and responsive support team around. Right now, Greyfinch is giving a $500 discount to our listeners. Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen to learn more and see why it's one of the fastest growing providers in America. Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence. Yeah, for sure. And I think that just rolls into structure and just what we have to do. Again, we can't just run an office just in chaos. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that well. And when you really think about setting goals and looking for what results you're going to get out of those objectives within those goals that you're setting if you don't have structure, if you aren't talking about things, if you aren't keeping them in front of you. A 10-year plan is very different than a quarterly plan. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that rolls into team meetings with doctors and their offices, because I feel like I've definitely got my own thoughts on team meetings and all of that. But when it is, I'll just say, when I feel like it's just talking at your team for an hour, that's a very different,
Yeah.
you're going to get a very different result out of that meeting versus where you're really talking about your OKRs and what that's about. So can you just dive into that a little bit for us?
My approach to meetings is the opposite of what most people are actually doing.
We're probably on the same page on this one.
Okay. Yeah. I like an agenda. Granted, I work a lot with teams who are hybrid, like some remote and some in office. So you have a lot of shared docs. So let's say for simplicity, Google spreadsheet is our live agenda. And the doctor can absolutely add a couple of things that they want to speak to. But it's the team. It's the team that is presenting to the CEO of the company and getting their feedback. If we have team members who are the directors of their department, if they own their role, they are owning their OKRs or their KPIs or whatever, this can apply to whatever system you're using. They are responsible for bringing to the table what are the points that should be discussed in the group setting.
Sure.
So when we have OKRs implemented, it's very simple. There's like a light system. Okay, this is in yellow, this is in red. I'm going to bring these. I'm not going to bring the green or what have you. But the vast majority of the people talking should be the team. The doctor should be talking the least amount and just adding commentary or providing recommendations and letting the team members really present. It's difficult to have, let's say, weekly meetings. It's like unrealistic for most teams. Yes. But I do like weekly check-ins, but it can be done asynchronously, right? You can have a Slack channel, you can have whatever, Google Chat, and say, I updated my OKRs this week. This is in focus. This is what I'm going to do about it because I'm falling behind. So they're also coming with the solution, not just sharing a problem. And so then you have the accountability of, I know that they're looking at it because we do an asynchronous check-in every Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love that. And again, it's just using these tools that are out there for us in our, that aren't necessarily in our industry, but they're out there, like the Slack channels and all these different tools that are out there to help us communicate and just do business better without having to physically do face-to-face meetings that a lot of times just really take up time. I am sure, and this maybe is too deep to get into onto this call, but I'm sure there is a doc that's, are you kidding me? If I let my team have all the floor of the entire meeting, all that they would do is complain the whole time and we get nothing done. I'm wondering if you could just talk to that for just a minute about how do you help control that, or some suggestions for docs on that.
Yeah, so you're right. It's a process. So you start with, they have to own their role, right? Start with that. And probably in the beginning, you're having to lead the meetings and pull it out of them, and also provide some mentoring. Hey, these are the things that I expect you to come and share in the meetings. Make sure you're bringing X, Y, and Z. Over time, they may say, hey, doc, X is no longer relevant. I'm going to actually bring A, Y, Z as well. Starting off providing them the guidance.
Yes.
And then weaning them into, no, you have the floor. I trust in you is very powerful, but necessary. Providing the structure allows for clarity on where we're at, how we're performing at all times, instead of patient day, admin day, scramble, where are we at? So the structure for many that I've spoken with are like, this is a lot. I don't know. It seems like a busy work, which I'm anti-busy work. And they go, wait, it's an admin day. I don't have to figure out what reports I should pull, or I don't have to figure out where we are. I know where I'm at with I know that today my OBS overdue recall without a future appointment is at 97. I know that because I'm keeping an eye on it, because I'm supposed to keep an eye on it. And I know that on my admin day, I don't have to strategize. I look at my objectives and key results, and I know that these are the things I'm focusing on because those are the things that are out of line for me. So the structure and the clarity of the team the structure will provide the clarity to the team, and then they will understand it a bit more in terms of how to contribute in the meetings. Yes. It might take a few months before you're like, wow, I can really just sit back and trust.
Yep.
But you also have to provide the grace and space for them to make a mistake. I actually had this conversation with 2 team members yesterday. I said, you have the permission to make a mistake. You don't have the permission to use doc so-and-so as a crutch. Mm-hmm. Like they're at that point where they still, hold on, let me add. I'm like, no, make the mistake, because you, at some point, you have to go on your own.
Yes, absolutely. And how freeing that is for a doctor to know that the team isn't constantly coming at them. That's, again, it's just such a drag mentally too, when you're like, oh, I got to stop what I'm doing. I got to think about this, whatever. Now I got to come back. And it's just very, just is not a good use of anybody's time. So let's move into, as a practice starts doing this and they start getting in the habit of doing this, how does that relate then into rocks and what that looks like? And if you can talk about what a quarterly or monthly, or what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with like rocks, because probably many people don't know what that is. Yeah. So I guess taking the analogy of a jar, and sand is all the little tasks. Pebbles are like kind of bigger tasks. And the rocks are like, I went to a conference and I want to implement this big thing, and we got to have time to do it. If all your team members are filling their jar with sand, there's no room for rocks. There's no room for pebbles, let alone rocks. So how do I carve out that time proactively to fit those rocks in the jar and fill up the rest with sand? Yeah. That's the idea. So it's also like, in order to get those rocks, those big objectives completed, you can't have your team doing busy work for the sake of busy work. And if we're ahead on our targets and the OKRs, they give us permission to, I'm not going to run that report this week. I have the space to do X, Y, and Z for this objective. So I will say that in order to carve out the time and space, you do have to have the data or the information to give yourself the permission, to give yourself the space to spend on those. But it's important that we're not just working the patient journey and we're going through the motions and I don't want to say complacent in our systems, but what are our objectives? Mm-hmm. If you have growth objectives, or you don't have growth objectives, maybe you have efficiency objectives. Maybe you want to move from 4 patient days a week to 3 patient days a week. Like again, going back, what's your 10 state for your practice as a doctor? What have you envisioned for yourself? Yes. And then what is it going to take to get there? And define what those rocks are for either this quarter or this year, and make sure that we know what they are. And they are a core part of the team meetings. You may have a month, especially going into summer, where you do not have time to work on said rock, but it's not out of sight, out of mind. It's on the meeting. It's intentionally put to the back burner. And there's a plan that in Q3, you're going to carve out more time or what have you.
Yeah, I love that. And again, it's just thinking bigger. And instead of, like you said, I think it's so easy to just get caught in the grind of doing business. And then we have these great ideas. I want to bring this in. I want to do this, but we haven't set up the systems and then to be able to get us to that point. So I think it's great to think about it. And I love the analogy of the rock and sand. And we've seen that analogy in lots of different places, but I really love the idea of thinking about it. If your team has got their whole jar filled with sand and you come back as a doctor, I want to do this. And they're like, you want to do that, doc? There's no way we can squeeze that in. But if we intentionally plan for how are we going to do that? How are we going to make time to eventually just have that become part of our practice, become part of what we're doing? It just sure seems like an easier way than just trying to shove a new idea into the mix and then going, I wonder why it didn't work out very well for us.
Yes. I can't, how many times where I've heard of, oh, I love this, I paid for this, but the only way it keeps going is if I talk about it in every morning huddle. It's the only way. Have you looked at their bandwidth? Have you looked at their OKRs? Are they struggling to keep up with this bare minimum expectation, let alone raising the bar? Yeah. So it's super important to look at. Otherwise, you get on the hamster wheel and you wonder, why didn't I grow this year?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that just takes me to our last point before we wrap up, and that's accountability. And I think as leaders, it's hard to find that balance, I think, from having your team be accountable and standing in their own space and them being the director of their own position, to, as an owner, having to micromanage or feeling like you need to micromanage and constantly follow up and constantly talk about this and that. So can you give us some little tips there on what you think our docs can do to maybe help with that, where they aren't falling into one or the other?
Yes. So, personal story. When I was in practice, I came from finance. So it was very structured. Accountability was simple. I go into a private practice and I'm like, there's this thing with the back in the front office. There's this I'm sensitive thing. And I'm like, this is all new. And I had to find a way to make the accountability not personal. It's not personal. And it's not even, I would say accountability isn't an accusation either. It can sometimes feel that way, but holding somebody accountable is just like a coach holds a player accountable. Hey, don't forget. There's no accusation. I'm here to help. And that's where a lot of doctors sometimes struggle with hiring the right office manager, because they have different personalities and the way that they hold the team accountable isn't good for the culture of my team. I need the right person. And that becomes so difficult to try to source and find the right person who has the right personality and the right demeanor all the time so that everything is copacetic all the time. Instead, the structure that we've laid out, the accountability happens. And granted, we had to have ground rules with the team, but with the team leading the meetings, for example, and we all can see that someone's Mike or Jenny's OKR in this particular area is falling behind. It's not an accusation of what are you doing wrong? It's this is falling behind. How can we help? Is it bandwidth? But they're self-reporting, or not always self-reporting because we can pull the data from whatever tools you're using, but they're self-presenting the data themselves.
Yeah.
You don't have to say, hey, I saw the numbers and you're not doing your job. They are saying, this is where I'm at. And then the accountability comes from, hey, I saw that. How can we help? And obviously in that, if there's signs of disengagement or that, then you know that there's a coaching or the other type of accountability problem. But when you have the structure and you put the ball in their court, the accountability is not personal anymore.
Yeah, I love that. And that is something I talk a lot about with my clients, is there are times where we do have to make these decisions and it's hard to take the personal component out of it, but we really need to do that. We do need to come at this, as you are saying, this is not an attack on Jenny. This is really looking at it from a business perspective and saying, okay, where are we at? Jenny, report on what is getting in your way for doing those follow-up calls in the TC room. And she may be like, we've had a great month with new patient exams, but I have been on new patient exams all month long, and there has been no time, or I was on it. Like there's so many different things that they can bring up, and it isn't just tell me your excuse for why it's not done. There could be so many things. It could be breakdowns in. I just think this is just such a great way to think about it versus just us as the doctor against them as the employee, or vice versa.
Yeah. And even as simple as, Jenny, you don't know where you're at with your follow-up. You have to carve out time to do that.
Yeah.
And so does this mean that we need to schedule less consults? There are some offices where we have actually know that this particular treatment coordinator, as soon as they see over 100 consults in a month, the conversion rate tanks. There's fatigue, there's burnout.
Yep.
Okay, where are we at? That's an OKR scheduling. So then now the new patient coordinator sees, okay, this is where we're at month to date with appointments for Jenny. I can't schedule anymore for her. We're going to let the next patient days, we're going to block out some columns and she's going to get some follow-up then.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. As I know you and I could just keep going, which is always great, right? You've got such great information and this is the fun stuff. I really love talking about all this because this is, like I said, the unsexy side of business, but yet the things that we have to think about as business owners. And it doesn't matter what industry we're in. These are things that we have to think about if you've got a team surrounding you. So I'm wondering if somebody who's listening is like, gosh, Casey's exactly, maybe I do need like that kind of higher level mentor to help me get some of these pieces in place. What's going to be the best way that they can contact you, maybe have a conversation with you, take it to the next step?
Yeah, you can reach out to me. My name is Casey. It's spelled Casey at CascadEffects.com. Now, I will say that in the middle of Cascade and effects is one E. It's a shared E. So it's CascadEffects.
Great. Awesome. All right, Casey, you remember from before, the way I like to finish up our sessions is with the speed round. Are you ready for the speed round challenge? Okay, here we go. What is one daily habit or ritual that has helped you stay productive or balanced?
Self-care. It's funny. You do less, you actually are more productive.
That is so true. It is so true. And when we get that out of whack, boy, you can tell a difference, right?
Yeah, 100%.
What is your go-to strategy for getting unstuck or facing a tough problem?
I sit in the sauna.
Ooh,
I just need mental space and silence.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. All right. If you could add one unconventional perk to a workspace, what do you think a workspace needs?
I love when a practice offers like the yoga or some physical activity on an admin day at a lunch break.
Ooh, I
love it.
Yeah, that's great. All right. And then as we finish up, one piece of advice you wish you had followed earlier in your career.
That contrarian advice isn't always right or wrong. Sometimes we get some piece of advice like, oh, I want to do something different for the sake of being different. Or we hear it and we go, no, that's not the way it is. And having that initial judgment. So I think letting ego aside and being open-minded, that even though whatever you're doing, whatever it's contrarian against, it could actually be better. Even if it's already good, that could get you to the next level.
Yeah, I love that. Casey, again, thank you so much for being on Hey Docs with me. This was a great episode. I know my guests that are out there listening are like, that was great. I got some good pearls out of this. So thank you so much. And I hope to have you on again.
Thank you so much, Jill. Pleasure. So much fun.
See ya.